These photos show a happy married couple. The girl in the picture still has no idea she is hugging the worst person in her life. The one she loved will turn out to be a tormentor who will make her disabled. One day he will take her to the forest and cut off her hands with an axe. December 11th, 2017 was an ordinary day in the hospital in the small town of Serpukhov in the Moscow region of Russia. That day, patients waited their turn as usual. Suddenly, a young man dragged a girl into the department. "Hurry up, you see, the woman has no hands. There is a lot of blood loss," the man said and quickly left. The doctors ran out of their offices, and when they saw the woman, they were shocked. She was missing her left hand, and her right hand looked like a bloody mess. The arm above the wrists were tied with medical tourniquets. Despite her serious condition, the girl was conscious. "Please call my mom. My children are in kindergarten and need to be picked up," she said, dictating her mother's phone number. The people in the hospital were confused. "How did this happen?" they asked. The girl replied, "My husband cut off my hands with an axe." After this, the girl lost consciousness. The doctors immediately got to work. They began surgery to amputate her hands and form two stumps. The girl's right hand was too crushed for doctors to save it. The monster operated with sophistication. He chopped her hand into small pieces so that later it would be impossible to restore it. Meanwhile, the girl's parents and journalists arrived at the hospital. This terrible story quickly received a lot of publicity. Everyone was terrified. What monster did this? How could this happen? How will this 25-year-old woman live in the future without hands? How will she be able to take care of herself and her children? At that time, there were too many questions to which no one knew the answer. This woman will tell her story only later, having undergone many operations on her hands, and her story will shock everyone. They were ordinary 20-year-old students when they fell in love with each other. Margarita and Dmitry met during their school years and then studied together in college. Their love affair began about a year before the wedding. They got married in 2012 and seemed very happy at the time. What a beautiful couple, everyone around them thought. They had a lot in common with each other. Both were from middle-class families and dreamed of having many children. A year after the wedding, Margarita Gracheva gave birth to a son, Dima. A year later, their second son, Danila, was born. The boys were welcome and loved. At that time, Margarita continued to study at the university, and Dmitry supported the family. The girl never complained about life. The couple lived in a small apartment in the Moscow region and had everything they needed. They didn't use alcohol or illegal substances. In the best years of their family life, Dmitry was not an abuser and did not offend his wife. However, he always had a complex character. For example, sometimes he could tell his wife that he would kill her if she cheated on him. Margarita did not take this seriously because betrayal was unacceptable to her. She also ignored the fact that her husband was always touchy and hot-tempered. Sometimes he could cause a scandal over a trifle, for example, because his wife forgot to pick up his gloves from the workshop. Margarita turned a blind eye to many of her husband's shortcomings. Moreover, while raising children, she was utterly dependent on him because she could not work at that time. But when the kids grew up and went to kindergarten, Margarita decided to go to work. She got a job as a manager in a local newspaper's marketing and advertising department. The girl was energetic and ambitious, so she soon received a promotion. Her husband may have been jealous of her success. Since he did not climb the career ladder, he worked as an ordinary driver in a warehouse and had a small income. When Margarita began to spend more time at work, the relationship between the spouses became more tense. They grew more and more distant from each other. At some point, they began to live like neighbors. In addition, Dmitry stopped helping her with the kids and taking on financial expenses. Margarita tried to improve relations with her husband, but he closed himself off and sometimes did not respond to her phrases. At some point, Margarita realized she no longer wanted to live with this man. She told her husband about the divorce, but he did not pay attention since he decided it was not serious. Only when Margarita collected all the documents for the divorce did he realize that she was determined. Since then, Dmitry has changed dramatically. He decided that his wife wanted to get a divorce because she had found another man. She is bad, unfaithful, a deceiver, he thought, looking for evidence of her betrayal. Dmitry began looking through her phone and social media accounts. One day he discovered his wife's usual work correspondence with a male colleague, which caused a scandal. He woke her up in the middle of the night and started kicking her legs. The next time he tore up her passport so that she could not file for divorce. Dmitry began to monitor all his wife's movements and once forced her to testify on a lie detector test. Margarita agreed since she had nothing to hide. She directly told her husband that she had never cheated on him but wanted to get a divorce only because of his unbearable character. Dmitry did not believe and demanded confessions of treason. He threatened to maim her and throw acid at her. Margarita did not think that he was saying this seriously. How could he do this to the mother of his children? Despite the problematic relationship between the spouses, Dmitry loved his sons and never offended them, despite their suspicion that his youngest son was from another man. Margarita only became more decisive on her intention to divorce. She convinced Dmitry to move out of the apartment. He had to agree, but when he picked up his things, he made a big mess before leaving. He cut up her coat, ruined some of her equipment, and threw away all her makeup, so she could not be beautiful for another man. When they no longer lived together, he continued stalking her, watching around the house and looking for evidence of betrayal. He offered to take her by car to a beauty salon one day. Margarita agreed because she still hoped they could part on good terms for the children's sake. But Dmitry took her not to the salon, but to a deserted forest. There he put a knife to her throat and demanded that she confess to treason. Everything ended well that day. Margarita managed to convince him that there was no betrayal and calm him down. She returned to the city alive and well. The next day she contacted the police, but no one helped her. It is important to note here how vulnerable victims of abuse are in Russia, where there is no law on domestic violence. Family abuse is considered a minor offense. Threats, harassment, and even beatings are not a reason to bring the offender to justice. Therefore, many women are completely defenseless against their abusers. If the police had punished Dmitry, Margarita could have remained healthy with 2 hands, but they ignored her appeal, and Dmitry felt his complete impunity. On December 11, 2017, he committed inhuman cruelty, which divided Margarita's life into before and after. That day, Dmitry behaved surprisingly calmly. He pretended that he wanted to improve relations. Margarita was forced to communicate with him for the sake of their children. She still hoped that they could separate normally, so she accepted his help when he offered to drive the children to kindergarten. After that, she hoped he would take her to the city, but he retook her to the forest. Margarita was frightened but could not do anything. He took her mobile phone and blocked the car doors. Therefore, she could not contact anyone. Jumping out of the car would also be risky and pointless. When the car arrived in a deserted place in the forest, Dmitry ordered her to get out. He took off her coat. Then he opened the trunk and took out tourniquets, zip ties, and an axe. There was also a jar with some kind of liquid, probably acid, but he did not take it. Margarita tried calming him down, but Dmitry did not listen. He told her, "You don't know how much you hurt me. No physical pain can compare with mental pain, but today you will experience it for yourself. It's all your fault." After that, he ordered her to go into the forest. She cried and begged him to stop. She could not run away because he would have caught her anyway. She could only ask him to come to his senses, but he had already decided everything long ago. He tied her arms with zip ties and began chopping her hands with the axe. She struggled and screamed, but he continued. This torment lasted almost an hour and a half, and all this time she was conscious. His action was not emotional and sudden. It was a carefully planned act of inhuman cruelty and revenge. He did not want to kill her. He wanted her to suffer all her life so that she would wake up every morning, see stumps instead of hands, and remember him. He wanted her never again to be able to hug children, drive a car, or do a manicure, so that her life would be like endless torture. Life without hands, what could be more painful? He wanted to cause her as much pain and suffering as possible. He prepared for this inhuman act of cruelty for almost 2 weeks. Dmitry read a lot of information about hand amputation. He wanted to make sure that she remained alive, since he expected that he would receive much less for this crime than for murder. He wished that he would be sent to prison for only 5 to 6 years, and by the age of 30 he would be released, and she would remain disabled forever and would suffer every day, every minute. Having dealt with her hands with an axe, he tied her arms with zip ties so that she would not die from loss of blood. Then he dragged her into the car and took her to the hospital himself, where he handed her over to the doctors. After that, the monster went to the police and confessed everything. He never regretted what he did because he was sure that she deserved it for her infidelity and deception. He was sent for a psychiatric examination, but he was declared sane. Dmitry had a personality disorder, but he was not crazy. He was just absolute evil, an evil that is beyond human understanding. Next time they had to meet in court, his eyes were absolutely shameless. He rejoiced looking at her and her suffering. He never apologized to her, and he threatened that he would return to her, and next time he would cut off the hands of all of her relatives, everyone she loved. By court decision, Dmitry was deprived of parental rights and sentenced to 14 years in a maximum security colony. Do you think this is fair for such a brutal crime? After all, compared to this, she will have to suffer without hands all her life. When Margarita recalls her husband's behavior, she says there was nothing to indicate that he could be a maniac. He had a complex character, he did not like to admit he was guilty, but this still does not mean anything. He grew up with a mother who divorced his abusive father. Dmitry's dad, as it later turned out, was in prison for murder in a gang fight. One of the neighbors later recalled that as a child, Dmitry hung out with bad guys and tortured animals. He was also expelled from school because of a fight. Grachev's mother always supported her son and said he grew up in love. At the trial, she said that her son was simply driven to commit a crime. Margarita could not forgive such words. Because of this, she forbade his mother from communicating with her grandchildren. Margarita Gracheva underwent many operations on her hands. By a happy coincidence, her left hand was pieced together. When the monster showed the crime scene where he had chopped off her hands, the police collected several pieces of her left hand. Fortunately, the weather was cold that day, and the human flesh was preserved. Parts of the left hand were handed over to the doctors, who collected it piece by piece and sewed it onto Margarita. The operation lasted many hours and no one promised a positive result, but a miracle happened and the hand took root. Today the girl's left hand operates only 25%. Her right hand was never restored. Margarita's family collected an impressive amount of money thanks to caring people. In Germany, she was given an artificial hand, which helps her in everyday life. Such a prosthesis costs about $60,000. The amount is impressive for a disabled woman and mother of 2 children who can no longer work as before. In addition, this artificial arm must be replaced every 2 years, and in any case it will not replace a natural hand. Margarita had to learn to live again. Like a child, she again learned to do many things that seemed ordinary to healthy people. How to cook a meal, pour yourself a cup of coffee, put on clothes, and do her hair. These simple things are now extremely difficult for her. She can no longer zip or tie her shoelaces and always needs help. In addition to problems in everyday life, the loss of her hands led to constant pain. Doctors advised her to take painkillers as little as possible, as they could be addictive. Therefore, every day she has to overcome constant aching pain. But despite all the difficulties, Margarita continues to live, first of all for the sake of the children. She cannot give up and sink into depression because her sons need her. Margarita decided to tell her story in a book called Happy Without Hands. She also gave many interviews to journalists and starred in several documentaries and television shows. Margarita considers it essential to tell her story to raise the critical topic of domestic violence and tell everyone who is in similar situation, be strong, don't tolerate bad treatment towards yourself, and leave as quickly as possible from the person who makes you suffer. She also tried to urge the authorities to pass a law on domestic violence, but unfortunately this project is constantly blocked. Therefore, when her ex-husband is released, he can find her anytime and come to her home. He will be able to pursue her again until he kills her or cuts off some other parts of her body. The police do not issue any protection orders in such cases. The victims are not protected in any way. They are in constant danger. In the future, Margarita believes that she will have to go abroad. But why should she run away? After all, she did not do anything wrong. This problem also affects many other women. But while her ex-husband is in prison, Margarita is rebuilding her life. Today she is only 31 years old, and her whole life is ahead of her. Despite her disability, she continues to feel like a beautiful young woman. Once she took part in a photo shoot wearing only her underwear, and she was gorgeous. A few years ago, Margarita got married again. She met her future husband Maxim on social media. He is a musician and master of sports in chess. One day he wrote to her, "Hi, how are you? You have a very cool prosthesis. It suits you very well." She accidentally saw this message and replied. At that time she had over 10,000 letters from different people, so it was a miracle that she saw it. On their first date, they immediately liked each other. Dating was easy and relaxed. They lived in different cities, so they communicated at a distance for some time. But then they decided to live together. He accepted her story and began raising her sons as his own. He also provides financially for the family since Margarita cannot work. After their wedding, they had a common son, Yaroslav, who is 2 years old now. Today, the family is building their new house where they want to live together. They look so happy. They travel a lot and make many plans for the future. Margarita is almost used to her new prosthesis. She can work at the computer and drive a car. The children jokingly call her Transformer Mom. However, of course, an artificial hand will never replace her real one, so her life will never be as before. Many people support this woman in every possible way, both morally and financially. But she also has a lot of haters. Some people believe that she is to blame for what happened, that she provoked her husband. Also, some dislikes that she promotes her story too much, and some are not at all happy that she smiles too much. I think only people without empathy would say something like that. Unfortunately, in Russian culture, it is expected to blame the victim. I so hope this will be a thing of the past one day. By her example, Margarita shows that even in the most desperate situation, one must be cheerful and enjoy life no matter what. The best revenge she can take on her monster ex-husband, who deprived her of her hands, is to be happy and smile joyfully in photos on social media. When he sees that he could not ruin her life with his cruel act, he will perhaps understand what he was wrong. Remember that evil is near, and thanks for watching.